So one of the things I wanted to do with this machine is try to make a Windows XP gaming box to play some older games from the XP era. Originally I was going to go with a Radeon HD 6450 for a graphics card because those are compatible with Windows XP and they're very cheap and very common around here. But what I ended up actually going with was a GT 710 from Nvidia, which was cheaper, faster, and doesn't fucking fit in the case at all. I wasted about half an hour trying to get the card in such a way that I could still use the VGA port, kind of taping it into the slot beside it. None of it really worked, so I ended up just giving up and using an HDMI to VGA converter, which is kind of stupid, but it works. As I was trying to get that video card in there, I started thinking, well, do I really need a Windows XP machine to play these games? After all, by this point, about 2001 to 2007, games had become a lot less dependent on the hardware. Things like DirectX had allowed them to be more compatible with various machines, and the standards haven't really changed that much. There's plenty of backwards compatibility. Full specs are in the description, of course. The XP test machine is the Optiplex 755, shown in the last video. The only new upgrade is the GT 710, which, depending on which benchmarks you believe, either performs similarly to, or much better than, the latest and best DirectX 9 cards. It is much newer, but it is compatible with XP. My Windows 10 test rig is my main machine, which is an eGPU setup, which I will make a video about someday, consisting of a Dell XPS 159550 connected through Thunderbolt 3 to a GTX 1080. It is running Windows 10 1703. I started with a really long list of games that I liked in the past and ones that the internet really liked. I had to cut it down to about 18, and then I had to change that lineup a bit because some of these games I actually couldn't get legitimately or otherwise. I will talk about some of the ones I omitted deliberately or otherwise, as well as some of the ones I subbed in. First up is the original Deus Ex, released in 2000. It's probably one of the few good things to come out of Ion Storm. Technically it's before the XP era, but I know a lot of people would want to see this game and I really wanted to try it, so I just kind of snuck it in. I have the Steam version, which I bought many years back but haven't actually tried until now, and I just installed it and it ran fine. The only issue I ran into was a fairly minor one where the water made the game lag like hell, but I could fix that easily by just changing the texture color depth to 32-bit, which you should probably do anyway. I only got through the tutorial and played a tiny bit of the first level. I died immediately, but this game looks pretty cool, so I'll definitely be coming back to it when I have time. Next up is Star Trek Voyager Elite Force, released in 2000, made by Raven Software using the Quake 3 engine. Raven Software? That explains a lot, actually. This one's a bit of a mixed bag when it comes to compatibility. The installer is 16-bit and it doesn't run at all, but it's old and stupid enough that you can just copy the files off the disk and expect it to work, and work it does. The game itself runs perfectly fine on my Windows 10 machine, and it's actually just as awesome as I remember it being. So I'll definitely be coming back to this one. It's a little bit dated, but it's very well done. So here's another game that I've really wanted to play for quite a long time. This is The Operative, No One Lives Forever, developed by Monolith Productions and published by Fox Interactive. Yes, that Fox. Came out in 2001. This game has a really cool kind of cartoonish 1960s spy fiction style, and it's starring an early female FPS protagonist, Kate Archer. Wait, Agent Archer?
Hang on. Wait. Damn it, I have something for this.
Anyway, I used the Revival Edition, which is of dubious legality. This game is in legal limbo, but nobody's taken this down yet, so it's probably fine, and it does solve a few issues. Unfortunately, it doesn't solve the biggest issue I had with this game, which is that the UI causes the game to lag very badly. You can work around this by turning off most of the HUD messages, and then the game runs okay until they rarely pop up and it lags for a few seconds. I tried a few other tweaks, but I couldn't fully fix it, and in its current state, it's definitely playable, but it's not great. Anyway, I love the style and the tone of this game. I was less impressed by the mechanics and the level design. I'll still probably come back to this at some point. Max Payne is another title from 2001, this one developed by Remedy Entertainment. This one was definitely better when it came to compatibility, but it still did have some issues. I have the Steam version, which installed easily and ran, but there were some audio problems. I installed an unofficial patch which did fix the audio problems and a few performance issues, but I still can't enable anti-aliasing without the frame rate taking a complete and utter nosedive. This game, while the story is ridiculously over the top, I mean, Max Payne, really? But I grew to like the style with this kind of neo-noir, although I'm still not entirely keen on the gameplay. I like the idea of the bullet time, but it doesn't really seem to work very well for me. But anyway, if you're a fan of this series, this game works pretty well. Our last game from 2001 is Operation Flashpoint Cold War Crisis. This was developed by Bohemia Interactive and published by Codemasters. So I installed this game and turned all the settings up, 4K resolution, max quality, draw distance, and then it turns out that some of them are bugged and the game ground to a halt, even on my much too new for this game machine. I reset the settings, and the game looked like crap, but I just, I dare not touch them. I was worried about breaking it all over again. So, funny story, the version I had was a GOG version. I assumed that this game was abandonware because I couldn't find it anywhere. It turns out it's still available, but because of some licensing snafu, it's labeled as Arma Cold War Assault. So I felt so bad about that I went to go and buy it, and then I found out that actually I own this game already. Anyway, I have fond memories of this game, but it's not really fun. It's a realistic shooter, which means there's just lots of waiting, you move molasses slow, and then you die in 2 shots and have to do the whole thing over again. Some people do like these, but this is definitely not my thing, so I will not be picking this game up again. I also tried the sequel to No One Lives Forever, creatively titled No One Lives Forever 2, A Spy in Harm's Way. I used the Revival Edition again, but clearly Lithtech hasn't aged well. This game certainly runs better than the first one, but it still has some issues. It's hard to tell because I screwed up and recorded at 30 frames per second, but there is quite a bit of stuttering that seems to be maybe related to the audio engine. There is a potential fix out there, but I wasn't willing to try it because it's kind of terrifying. You have to overwrite a system file with a sketchy DLL. In any case, this game is definitely playable. I'm not sure how much I like the gameplay compared to the first, but the look and feel certainly has improved. Morrowind. Bethesda's masterpiece really needs no introduction. This is arguably the first modern Elder Scrolls game, and it came out in 2002, quite a long time ago. To be honest, I'm not sure how well it's really aged. The world itself is really neat and it feels truly alien unlike later games, and it definitely has more depth to the RPG elements. On the other hand, the UI is horrifying even by Bethesda standards, and the gameplay is clunky as all hell. I actually installed this game from my old Morrowind CD, which came with a Radeon 9800 Pro All-in-Wonder. That version was just about perfect, but it did crash on exit. So I also tried the Steam version, which I bought years later. It comes with the expansions, the latest patches, and it didn't have that bug. It was about as perfect as this infamously glitchy game can be. Next up, we have the final combat flight simulator from Microsoft, released in 2002, Combat Flight Simulator 3. I don't know which particular version I have. It's just like a CD in a case that's not original. Anyway, the installer works, but the game for some reason needs a no CD crack to run even if I have the disc in the drive, something about the DRM I guess Win 10 doesn't like. 4K resolution is there, but it's not really usable. 720p works perfectly fine. It's interesting how hooked into Windows this is, being a Microsoft product and all. It even uses the Windows 10 error sound, which I found pretty amusing. The game itself runs fine, even works with my Xbox One controller. The mappings are a bit weird, but you can change those. This is probably one of my favorite thrift store finds of all time. It's definitely my favorite flight sim, and has this balance of realism and, I guess, arcadiness that I really like. So I'm pretty happy to play it again. Moving into 2003, we have Freelancer. This is a space combat sim developed by Digital Anvil and published by Microsoft Game Studios. And it was created by Chris Roberts of Wing Commander and Star Citizen, I guess, fame? Honestly, I don't know much about this game. It's one of those space combat slash trading slash, I don't know, freelancing games. It looks pretty cool, the graphics are pretty nice, and it seems pretty fun from the little bit I've played. There are 2 things that I really didn't like, though, and that is the mouse-driven controls. They suck, and you have to play as this douchebag.
You Junko Zane?
Yes?
I believe you have business to discuss.
Wait!
Sorry. The bartender said you work for the Liberty Security Force.
And who do you work for, Mr.
Trent. I work for myself.
So this game runs mostly fine, but at high settings and high resolutions it really starts to crawl for some reason. I'm not sure if this is a bug or if it's just that demanding and or poorly optimized, but, you know, if you're willing to deal with reasonable settings for the time, you can play it just fine. Knights of the Old Republic really needs no introduction. This is a classic BioWare epic, if not the classic BioWare epic. This is one of those games that I've wanted to play for a really long time, but I just haven't been able to get around to. My first impressions are that it's really just as clunky as every RPG of its time seems to be for some reason, but it definitely is a BioWare game in every sense of the word. It has that signature, I guess, character-driven cinematic flair to it. It's very well done. I have the Steam version, which is, I hope, up to the latest patches and such. It inexplicably switches video modes a lot, I think going in and out of pre-rendered cutscenes, and maybe that's why it didn't record. Yeah, this game didn't record, but it was perfectly playable. In 2004, the original Far Cry came out. This was developed by Crytek and published by Ubisoft. As far as I know, the franchise is actually owned completely by Ubisoft now. Crytek no longer has anything to do with it. Anyway, this is the first outing of CryEngine, and yeah, I'm getting pretty excited for its technology, and I was at the time, too. That was a big deal. And I played this game a little bit at the time, but it's not one I remember that much, other than that. It seems to be a pretty decent first-person shooter with a strong narrative hook when I'm playing it now, although maybe it's a little vulnerable to a few degenerate strategies. Anyway, I have the Steam version. I'm not running any 64-bit or other patches for this. It seems to run fine, except maybe there's an issue with the draw distance. I'm thinking, is the distance fading really that bad? And I'm looking at other screenshots, and you know what? This might not be a glitch. It might really be that bad. You know what? Close enough. It works. It plays fine. Heading into 2005, we have SWAT 4, the last entry in the Police Quest franchise. Yes, that Police Quest franchise. This was developed by Irrational Games and published by Vivendi Universal. Wow, those guys are both gone now. Anyway, I'm not a huge tactical shooter fan, but for some reason I just had a lot of fun with this game back in the day. It's running Unreal Engine 2. I have the GOG version, and it runs great. I did have to run as administrator because I guess UAC, but other than that, it worked fine. So this game is kind of like Rainbow Six, except you're a SWAT team, you have to follow police rules, and yeah, I'm really not very good at it. Silent Hunter 3 is another 2005 game. This one's a submarine simulator developed by Ubisoft Bucharest. I just really like submarines for some reason, that's why I originally got this game. You command a U-boat in World War II, sinking ships and trying not to die. It's a pretty deep simulation that lets you manually control a lot of things, which I liked. However, I did find it a little too realistic, and the modding community is even worse. They wanted to make it more realistic. And at one point I actually made it a mod that made the game basically crazy. Anyway, I have this game on disc. Actually, I think it's my first DVD game. It has Starforce DRM that can be removed, but I didn't want to risk having that on my new machine, so I just copied an install from an old drive that didn't have that, and that works fine, except the game only works in windowed mode, and this is a known issue. So if you can live with playing in a 1024 by 768 window, this game works 100% fine. I mean, it crashed once, but it always did that, even on XP. Age of Empires 3 is really Ensemble Studios' last hurrah, unless you count Halo Wars, but yeah. I actually thought this game was newer, like into the Vista era, but no, it came out in 2005. So I own this game on disc, but I used the Steam version for this. I also have it on Steam. And believe it or not, this is my favorite Age of Empires game. Yeah, I know it's crazy. And yeah, the campaign was bad, but I had a lot of fun with the skirmish and the multiplayer. I actually like the home city mechanics. The better graphics and sound than the Age of Empires 2 made it a way better experience for me. And of course, this is just one of my favorite historical periods. I'm not some imperialist bastard, but I just find it interesting because of all the changes happening in the world and some other reasons. So this game I know had some problems with desktop window manager. In Windows 7 it would disable Arrow when it runs, but Win 10 seems to be able to run single apps in some kind of compatibility context because that doesn't happen anymore. However, this game does rely on Direct Play, which is a deprecated Windows component you do have to explicitly install. Once I did that it ran fine, but it does rely on that deprecated component. Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter is a tactical shooter released by Ubisoft in 2006. This is actually not the kind of game I would buy, and I never bought this game. It came free with a motherboard or something. I just ran across the disc while searching for my other discs. So I tried it, and this game is better than I remember. I still don't love it, but it's better than I remember. I do like the gadgetry, and I like being able to command my squad mates. What I don't like are the glacial pace, the convoluted UI, the pretty terrible AI, or the lack of music. When I first got this game, I actually couldn't run it on my machine at the time, but on my modern machine it runs fine, even in 4K max settings. I would recommend not doing that and using like 1080p because the UI gets really small. We're almost to the Vista era now, so I think we're pretty much in the clear for compatibility, but we have one more game to try. Finally, we have The Witcher, CD Projekt Red's inaugural project, of course, released in 2007. I actually have the enhanced edition from GOG, which came out all of a year later. My initial impression was that this game is really kind of rough as hell, and it has really long cutscenes. The graphics are okay. They're pretty good for the time, but they're not standout amazing for the time, the way The Witcher 3 wowed us in 2015. And the combat, holy shit, the combat is fucking terrible. Am I even hitting this guy? It seems to work at 4K. It didn't run great at 4K. I had to turn some things down to get a smooth frame rate. It could be CPU bound or just not optimized for this hardware or resolution. Again, we're into the Vista era at this point, so I wasn't really expecting problems. I just kind of threw it in as a bit of a bonus. And speaking of bonuses, I also tried out all the games that came with Windows XP. I copied them over and tried them on my Windows 10 machine, and as you can see, all the card games, Solitaire, Spider Solitaire, Free Cell, and Hearts, as well as Minesweeper, they run fine, they're perfectly playable. Even that 3D pinball game seems to work. It's not as fun as I remember, though. In summary, we tested 16 games, and actually all of them were playable. 9 of them worked perfectly, or close enough to perfectly, requiring maybe a settings tweak at most. 7 of them had some issues, but of them 4 could be made to work near perfectly with specific tweaks or third-party patches. 5 if you really like playing games in a 1024x768 window. Really, there were only a few with unfixable issues. The 2 No One Lives Forever games, and probably anything that uses a lift tech, which had audio issues in one, graphics issues in the other, and Silent Hunter 3, which of course didn't work in anything except a window. But all of these are playable, which actually surprised me. I thought most of them would run, but I didn't think all of them would run. And as crazy as this sounds, that's arguably a better result than what I got on my XP system. So I went back and tried some of the problematic games on this system. I didn't have time to do all of them. Performance was generally good when it worked. This machine couldn't handle fraps at the same time, but when fraps was off, I could usually get a smooth 60 FPS. However, some of the games weren't playable at all. Star Trek Voyager Elite Force, the installer ran, but the game actually didn't. It would start up, and it would probably work fine if I could get past the menu, but it appeared off the side of the screen.
Would you like me to call out the target?
No One Lives Forever, those games worked perfectly, as did Max Payne and Silent Hunter 3. Operation Flashpoint was unstable. It either crashed or failed to load several times. I was able to get some meaningful gameplay out of it. Far Cry would just randomly hardlock. I think I managed to play about 30 seconds at most. It usually crashed on the loading screen. And Age of Empires 3 crashed once but seemed to be stable after, although this one ran like absolute dog shit. So I know that a lot of you are going to be screaming, wait, you forgot this game. And I did indeed miss some very significant games, and that's for a number of reasons. Black and White, I couldn't get at all. I couldn't even pirate this game. Rise of Nations, you can still get, but it was more money than I wanted to spend right now. Call of Duty, I have on disc, and I couldn't find the disc, and I'm not willing to pay for this game again. Fear, I don't like scary games. I'm not playing a game that's called fucking Fear. Sorry. Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 and Icewind Dale were re-released. Halo was patched. Half-Life 2 was patched in recent memory, so I don't anticipate problems with those. World of Warcraft is actively supported. And actually, SimCity 4, Half-Life 2, and The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, I'm still playing or have played in the past year with no problems, so I know those ones work. So in conclusion, well, nothing here is entirely conclusive. I have a limited sample size of one set of hardware and software for each operating system. and I was only able to play about 20 minutes to an hour of each game, so later game-breaking bugs are possible. On the other hand, I put a good effort, but not a massive one, into trying to get each game to work, so maybe more could be done. And on that note, I would like to shout out to PC Gaming Wiki and playoldpcgames.com. I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but I found them really helpful, and maybe you will too, in terms of getting these games to work. We can draw some suppositions. I'm not going to use the C word. And compatibility is pretty good between games of the XP era and modern hardware. Most people won't need an XP gaming machine. If you just want to play some of these old games, they'll probably work fine on your modern gaming rig, unless you're a purist or you really want to get the absolute best experience on certain games. You don't need another machine for that. In fact, in some cases, you'll get better results on a high-end modern gaming machine running a modern operating system than an old XP one. Next time, we're going to do Vista-era games and pre-XP games. 2 separate videos. This video took me a really long time to make. It took about 3 weeks on and off, and it just sunk a lot more time than I really wanted to put into it. So I'm going to try to play with the format and the way it was produced a little bit to cut that down while still bringing a decent quality video to you guys for those next ones. Anyway, please like, share, and subscribe. That's my lifeblood. And check out my Twitter. I usually post some hints and updates there before the full videos go up. Thanks for watching. See you next time.